As you can see on the slide that's shared now, you do have a QR code there. If you want to click that and have it on another device, you're welcome to open the presentation there. Brian is dropping them in the chat, and I'm going to actually pin one of those so he doesn't have to keep doing that, and it will stay pinned the whole time. And so you can always click it there if you need. And I have it throughout the slides as well through the presentation. So there'll be lots of opportunities to get the slides if you don't have them right now. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Vera Pinheiro.
Sorry, I got it. Earbud in.
I'm sorry. I was saying good luck tonight.
And if you don't mind muting yourself, unless you intend to speak, I'm trying to kind of find people and mute them as needed. But I'm the emerging technologies consultant. And of course, right now, the #1 emerging technology that is causing a lot of ripples in education as well as elsewhere is AI. And so we are doing all that we can to kind of help guide our PSUs in AI. And today's session is a follow-up session from a few weeks ago, which Stacy actually covered for me because I was out of work for a family emergency. And it was part 1, which was basically an introduction to AI, helping people understand what AI is and isn't, a little bit about how it works, and a little bit of beginning prompting. And so today's follow-up session is going to dive in more to the ethical considerations that we need to be contending with as educators as we deal with AI. And of course, there are many. And somebody is not muted. Let's see if we can. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and dive right in and get started. First of all, the 4 main concerns that you hear a lot about in education are these 4, and they cannot be understated. It's really, really important that we address them, and we'll dig into each one of them individually. But protecting students' data privacy, keeping people from being over dependent on AI. We don't want people's brains to just turn to mush, students in particular, because they're just using AI for everything. And bias, as you probably have heard, and we'll dig into a little more, the systems are trained on massive amounts of data that have inherent human biases in them. And so as educators, we have to be very mindful of that, making sure that we're not passing that bias along to our students, or reinforcing stereotypes and things like that. And we'll do some work with that today too. And then, of course, inaccuracies. Part of the part 1 series was helping people to understand that AI can be wrong. And even though it is it's not wrong as often now as it was a couple of years ago. It's getting better. It's probably never going to be completely 100% dependable because of the way the systems work. And last session kind of dug into that they're basically predictive models. And so occasionally they are going to predict incorrectly and give you what's called a hallucination, or what I prefer to call an inaccuracy, or something that's just wrong. And so we'll dig into those a little bit individually, and start with data privacy. Really big on everybody's minds, of course, with recent data breaches we've had with PowerSchool and such. But it's really, really important to understand that we should never be putting personally identifiable information into an open AI tool. And an open AI tool basically means a free tool, or a tool that you are paying for as a user, is still really considered an open AI tool. It is a little different if your district has paid for like an educational version, an enterprise version, or something like that of one of these tools. They may have a little more data protection, but I still would not recommend ever putting PII even in those. But personally identifiable information is any one of these things that you see on the screen, which could be used alone or in conjunction with any one of the others to identify a person. And we need to understand that whatever you put into an AI system could potentially be used for training the model, which means that it could then surface somewhere else, in someone else's chat, for example, a response, something like that. And so it's really important that we just don't include those. And it's also important to understand that the capabilities of the models have increased so much that doesn't just mean typing it in anymore. You can input PII by speaking it. You could use it computer vision, which would be taking your phone or your computer and scanning the room, and there could be something that was captured in that camera that could input personal information. And of course, you can actually upload personally identifiable information too, because all of these tools now allow you to upload documents, and that's the one that gives me the most heartburn. And I actually had someone a few weeks ago tell me that they thought if they took a spreadsheet and they just blocked out with a colored block the column that had PII in it and then uploaded it, that it was hidden. And it absolutely is not. The computer reads the underlying data. It's not just looking at the image. And so if you did that, that data would still be compromised. And so it's super important that we are very, very careful with that, and that we teach our teachers and our students to be very, very conscious of that and not input any of that data into the systems. And anytime anybody has a question, feel free to raise your hand, pop it in the chat, or unmute and speak. We'll take time to pause a few minutes for questions, but I don't want you holding on to them too long, because I know how that goes. Sometimes they just slip right away. So we do want to pause and answer questions as they come up if you have them. The next thing that I want to talk about is this idea of overdependence. And I know I've already talked to adults in my life that use AI frequently who are concerned with this, and I am as well. I kind of try to mitigate it myself, because I don't want to just go to AI every single thing that I need to do. I want to make sure that I'm keeping my own brain functional and operational. And, it's a muscle, you've got to use it. And so we want to make sure that we're teaching our students that as well. And so this is a graphic that's in our guidelines, adapted from one from the U.S. Department of Education, where they compared AI to they made a comparison between a RoboVac and an electric bike, but I expanded it for the education space, kind of give people an idea that there are some struggles that happen without AI that could be avoided now. Some of our students who have difficulties and disabilities and things like that, AI can actually be life-changing for them. And so AI can be like a mountain bike. Oops, something went wrong. We'll have to see what went wrong with my presentation. Give me a moment. I may have to represent. Sorry about that. Canva normally does not let me down often, but looks like it did this time. So I'm going to go ahead and get it started again, get my screens organized again, all of this messy stuff I did before you got on the call. Give me just 1 second. Okay. And so this graphic just kind of illustrates that. And I'm sorry, now I've got you on the wrong screen, the video on the wrong screen. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened to my presentation, but we'll get going here in a second. Okay. And so it illustrates that sometimes there's some struggle that inhibits learning that could be helped with AI. But if we just turn people loose on it without any training, appropriate training, can be dangerous. Actually, it can be dangerous like a motorcycle. But if we're given the right amount of training, teaching people to use it correctly, it's like a human bike where the human is always in control, and you use it for more productive learning. We have a lot of other things in our guidance about teaching students not to be overdependent. We have a 0 to infinity framework, which is like a whole session in itself, teaching students different ways of using the tools. But for today's session, we're going to focus mostly on some of these other ethical considerations and safety considerations that we need to know about. We already kind of mentioned the hallucinations and accuracies concept, but I really like this quote from Dan Fitzpatrick, who's the AI educator, has a really cool Scottish or English accent as well. But he calls them plausible, random sounding falsehoods. And that's really important because they are plausible. They are not going to jump out at you and be obvious on a first glance or obvious to someone who doesn't already have knowledge about the subject. And so it's much better for someone who has knowledge about a subject to be a user of AI than someone who doesn't. Because if you have no knowledge of it, you're just like if you talk to a person who is lying to you about something that you know nothing about, you're probably not going to detect the lies. But in AI, but if you know something about that topic, then you will detect it. Same thing goes with AI. You need to be knowledgeable about it already, and then you'll be able to kind of use your own knowledge to check it. But if you don't have that knowledge, you've got to use other sources, dependable sources, to check it. And we need to be teaching our students to do that. Fortunately, it's much easier today to do than it used to be. Chat GPT didn't used to give you source links, and now it does, and so do all of the other models, whether you're using Gemini, Perplexity, Claude, they'll all give you links to go and verify that information. And it's really important that we're teaching students that really critical step, which is also a really good critical thinking exercise to help students build that critical thinking capability that they're definitely going to need going forward. And so, because they're probabilistic, there will be sometimes things that are not correct from the training data, or just because the prompt wasn't good. We also can control this a lot with our prompting, becoming a better prompter. And we'll do another series. We did one a few months ago on prompting, and we'll do another one because it's changed a little. And so we'll do that probably coming up over the next late summer, early fall. But this is an example that kind of went viral on all of the social media channels a few months ago when Google decided to roll out its AI overview, which you probably see if you go to Google now and you type in a prompt in Google Chrome, you see an AI overview at the top, and it's good now. It's pretty good. But when it first rolled out, they had a few pretty big mess ups, and this is one of them, where it told people that they could add an eighth of a cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to make the pepperoni stick better. And so obviously that is something that most people would know better than. But again, it is something that was told, and our students in particular, having that mindset that the computer is always right and trusting technology inherently, we have to particularly be very, very careful with them. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm not sure what is up with Canva today. I'm probably just going to not put it in presentation mode. It won't be quite as big. Can you guys see that okay? Because it keeps closing out on me. Okay,
Yes,
so
we can see it.
okay, it won't be quite as big as I would like, but I'm not going to try to go through the whole setting up all my screens again while you're waiting. So we have to be really particularly careful as educators, because as educators, if you're using generative AI to help create lesson plans and things like that, which is wonderful, it's great for that. But we need to make sure that we're really verifying the information and that we are not passing along something that is not accurate to our students. And we're going to talk about some verification steps at the end. I have not heard of that happening in North Carolina, but I did hear of it happening elsewhere. And you're really breaking that trust with the student if you do that. And so we have to be really careful about verifying. This is another example that, it's not always life-threatening, but this is an example that actually was life-threatening, where someone was using AI to generate a book about edible mushrooms in the wild, which, as you know, probably, many mushrooms are very deadly and instantly deadly. And so there was cautionary statements about that some of the books on there had been written by AI, and they had some dangerous inaccuracies in them that could actually cause death or sickness. And so we've just got to make sure we're verifying, and we'll get to a little bit more to how to do that at the end. But another thing that we have to be really, really concerned about and just very cognizant of is that the bias that's inherent in these systems because of their training data. And so here's an example, which you can see 3 images there. And if you just look at them, you can see at the top of the image the prompt that I used and the tool that I used. The first one was created on back when ChatGPT used DALL-E 3. And all I said was create an image of a doctor and a nurse. And if you want to pop in the chat or come off mute and just tell me what kind of bias you see in that image, it's fairly obvious in this one. Miguel, it's pretty funny. Okay. Anybody want to talk about what kind of biases you see present in this image? Feel free to just come off mute if so, in that first image. Don't be shy. I know
Definitely the
yeah.
gender bias, right? The doctor is the male, the nurse is the female.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I see a couple people putting it in chat now as well. And I have done that multiple times, and you pretty much, I mean, occasionally, especially if you're using Adobe products, you may not get that every time, but most of the other tools, you're still going to get that every time because it's based on this huge data set of images that had been fed to the model, in which the majority of the doctors in that image set were males, and the majority of the nurses in that data set were females, and they were also white. Someone else pointed out the ethnicity. And so because of the data set it was trained on, it is just probability that it's going to, the majority of the time, it's going to give you those images. And so we have to be really careful about that we're not just constantly showing our students pictures of people that don't look like them. And we were talking about this before AI came out, textbooks and other things, making sure that we have representation and our students see themselves and people that look like them. And so sometimes with these models, you have to prompt for that. And again, if you're using Adobe Firefly or Adobe Express, they took a different approach than most, and they intentionally made sure that their data set was varied already and had a lot of diversity in it. And so with that model, you won't get that same experience, but you still have to be careful. And so we don't want to reinforce those stereotypes. We don't want all the little girls and the little brown children in our room saying, well, all the doctors are always white, I guess I can't be a doctor. We don't want to reinforce those stereotypes, as Brian said, in the heads of our children. And so something to think about. Notice also in the second one, I prompted it to create an image of a superhero. And it created this image that you see there before you, which of course, a lot of superheroes are males. But in order to get a female superhero, I had to say, create an image of a female superhero. And something else that I've noticed, and it's not as bad in this one, but also the females, usually if you have to add that female to it, a lot of times the female versions will be really sexualized. This one, not so much, but a little bit. And so we have to, also be sure that we're careful about that. And I've actually seen some examples of teachers using some of those images without really thinking about it. And they're showing some pretty sexualized images, which give of course, negative impressions about what women are supposed to look like. And so that's something we just have to be really conscious of. And I have a few other examples here that I'll show you, and then we're going to do a prompting exercise. But in this one, and for some reason, Miguel keeps having to join again. I'm not sure. He keeps getting kicked out. So Miguel, if you're hearing that, I'm sorry. You keep getting kicked out and having to rejoin. I'm not sure what's going on with that. But in this one, all I said was powerful business executive. And notice that again, I have a white male. He's in his, mid 50s probably. And if I prompted that over and over and over again, I would just get different versions probably of a white male in their mid 50s to late 60s, whatever. And so, of course, that can be harmful as well. But if I would to get a non-traditional business executive and add that word non-traditional to it, I get this guy. This guy wearing a funny suit, but he's still a white male, not quite as old. He's a little younger. So that might be, a little bit non-traditional, still not what I had in mind. And so in order to get any kind of representation, I have to keep adding to my prompt. And so I had to say a powerful woman business executive. And I finally got a woman. And notice that it is a white woman. Honestly, the second time I did this, I did get an African American woman. And so I was kind of somewhat pleased with that, but not on the first time. But if you'll notice too, again, this is not terribly sexualized, but she is a little bit sexualized. Also, you think about like size, she's like Barbie doll size. And so things like that, all of those kinds of things are part of the bias that's inherent in the training data. And so we have to be really conscious of that. Okay, so now we're going to do a little prompting exercise, and I invite you to open another tab and prompt with me, and then we'll have some sharing time where you can share your response. But this is a great activity to do with your staff or your students as well, to kind of help them understand, because bias is much easier to see in these images than it is in a passage. And so if you would, I have a list of tools on slide 12. And any one of these will work for you. ChatGPT, if you're on the free version, it will give you 3 images a day and has a new improved image generator, which is actually really good at creating photorealistic images now. Gemini, if you're a Gemini user, will definitely create images for you as well as Copilot, Firefly, ideogram, whichever one of those that you want to use. But what I would like for you to do is just in the message line type, create an image of, and then give some kind of stereotypical role. Like I use doctor, nurse, a business executive, superhero. So come up with some kind of a role, and then just evaluate your outcome and see if you see any kind of bias in that outcome. And I'm actually going to pop open Adobe Firefly and do it in Adobe Firefly to show you the difference. If you're not already signed up with Adobe Firefly and don't have an Adobe account, you might want to do one of the others that you're already using so that it's faster. But I'm going to use this one. But I didn't type it in right. And if you want to share your image in the chat when you get it, I welcome you to do that, share a link to it or whatever. So I'm going to put create an image of a firefighter. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give it any kind of any other adjectives about the firefighter. And I want to see what I get from that image. Okay. And somebody put one in there. Great idea. We can have a guessing game. Somebody tell me what you think Sue's prompt was. I think I know right away. And I can pull it up. If you look in the chat and see Sue's image, a middle-aged white woman. Okay, well, Adobe, I was trying to prove to you how Adobe was not stereotypical, but notice that I did get 4 male firefighters. I did get one who is not white, but it did give me all males. And so even within this data set, apparently there's a little bit of bias going on there. And I love seeing these coming in the chat. And I'm going to do that in Gemini and we'll see what we get. And I like to do this a lot and compare with different models for things like this. And they do change their system prompts sometimes. One time you'll get something and then the next time it won't. They're very undependable, but I'm going to put create a photorealistic image of a firefighter into Gemini and we'll see what we get. And then at the same time, I'm going to pop the same prompt into ChatGPT and we'll compare notes and see what we get. And I see lots of them coming in the chat. Look in the chat if you haven't already. Looks like we have a librarian, a teacher, a librarian, and okay. And anybody want to come off mute and talk about your image and kind of bias you detected in it? I could pull.
I used both. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go right ahead, Robin.
I used both Copilot and Adobe Firefly for my just create an image of a business executive, very vague, and both programs did it as, white man with hair.
Okay. So they're all white men. Anybody else have one?
I used the ideogram and I just said, create an image of a teacher. And it was interesting. 3 out of the 4 were young white females and 1 was a middle-aged Black female. I thought that was interesting.
So no males. Yes, very interesting. But that is a great exercise to help people understand how these models can be biased. And then you can take it a little further beyond that and you can ask for a different race, a different gender, or something like that, and then analyze it further. But so for mine, I have 6 out of 6 male firefighters, 5 out of 6 are white. And so, that's something that we just have to be aware of. We have to make sure that we are mitigating that the best we can. And the way to do that is with your prompting. And so if I say for Gemini, for example, I can say create a photorealistic image of a group of firefighters. And I can say ensure diversity. And I'm just leaving it at that. I could be more specific. I could say in at least one woman, whatever. But if I say ensure diversity, then we'll see what we get there as a result. And it does take a moment to create these images, obviously, which remember also that anything that takes longer with AI is something that is going to use more power. It's going to have more of an environmental impact. So I think this is a worthwhile exercise right now. But just keep that in mind. When this first came out about a year ago, and I was just burning it up and making all kinds of images, I saw something about the power consumption in it, and that made me feel guilty. So we'll just tell you that they're doing some things to mitigate that as well. But now, when I created a post and I just added that word diversity to ensure diversity, then you see that I have only 1 out of the 4 are white. 1 is a woman, and 5. And so 1 looks like potentially Hispanic. And so you get that diversity, but you have to ask for it generally. And so I'm seeing lots of others come in. I see lots of people prompted teachers or librarians, and I think every single one of them are women, and the majority are white. Okay, so again, all of that is something really important to think about and a good exercise to practice to kind of demonstrate it to people. But I don't want to spend too much more time on that. I think that we all had the opportunity to try it, and I appreciate you diving in and helping and try it. It makes it a lot more engaging when people are willing to share and speak up and engage and do the lessons. So I do appreciate that. Now, I want to share something else with you because, of course, images I like to start with because they're so much easier to see the bias in them. But we also have to be very cognizant in the text that we use as well. And also, something that people need to be really aware of is that you can cause the system to be biased. The systems, all of these AI systems are somewhat sycophantic, which means basically that they are eager to please you. They want to do what you want them to do. So they're kind of at your service. And so I have seen examples that made me cringe of people posting lessons online, and they've used very, very loaded, very biased language in their prompts, for example, on a very contentious conflict where they want to get a lesson for a student. And if they say, for example, like create a lesson explaining why Israel is the occupiers or something like that, and they're using that loaded language, so they're going to get that result. It's not going to be unbiased. And in the opposite, if you look on the opposite side of the conflict, the same thing, explain why Hamas are terrorists and should be banned. And so if you're loading up the prompt with bias, you're going to get a biased response. And so we have to be real conscious of that as educators. It's really important that we all have biases, we all have opinions, but it's important that we're not loading up our language when we're prompting in a way that we're giving students biased information and forming their opinions unfairly. And so this is an example that I have right here, just 2 prompts side by side, and you can see just changing very few words how different the results are. And I picked the most controversial person I could think of a few weeks ago, which was Elon Musk. And in the first one, I said, create a very short paragraph about why Elon Musk is so amazing and how he has contributed to the world and our country. And of course, I get a paragraph with a glowing paragraph about him and all the wonderful things he has done. And then if I just change a few words and say, write a short paragraph about why he's so horrible and how he's caused problems for the world, then I get the opposite. And so we have to be really conscious of that and make sure that we're aware of our own biases and that we are not passing them along to the AI model, which will then pass them along to the content that it creates for our students. And so the next slide is just remember that they are sycophantic. They want to please you. And so instead, what you've got to do is intentionally prompt for objectivity. And so this slide here has several different examples of ways that you can do that, but the result that you see on the right, and I know this may be small, hopefully you have it open in front of you since I can't present right at the moment, but I said create a very short paragraph about Elon Musk, ensure a fair, balanced, objective, and unbiased view of Musk that relies on facts. And then I get a very balanced, both sides of the equation kind of thing. Some good things he's done, some not so good things he's done. And that's super important. And somebody says, I feel ChatGPT can be condescending, it agrees with you in almost any idea. And you are correct. And actually, one of the most recent release, they rolled back because it was overly sycophantic. It was like sickeningly agreeable. And it's kind of like I've been around people like that before that, no matter what you say, they dive in and they agree with you and just change their opinions to match yours. And so they actually rolled back that update because people were pointing that out. But all of the systems have that to a degree because that's what they're made for. They're made to do what you want them to do. And so on the left here are some ideas of how you can make sure you're prompting for non-bias. Present well-sourced viewpoints, multiple viewpoints, neutral, factual language, avoid emotionally loaded or stereotypical terms, explicitly check for demographic, cultural, temporal bias before finalizing, acknowledge uncertainties or conflicting findings. If examples are needed, include diverse names, regions, and perspectives to ensure balance. Before responding, run an internal fairness audit and remove content that could perpetuate stereotypes. So we've got to make sure that we are doing our due diligence in our prompting to help make sure the models are not being biased. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move along. The synthetic media or digital plastic, as Leon Furs calls it, is also a concern that educators need to be aware of. And you all just created a bunch of synthetic digital plastic with those images, but we have it of course brings about some concerns. And you can do wonderful things, like you can create these fabulous works of art that I've never been an artist, and so I never could have done these things a few years ago. And these are actually like over a year old. I did these a long time ago. With a simple prompt, I can create beautiful things that I could never do before, which is nice. Kind of democratizes that. But then you also have the potential of creating images and things that are not real. And so we're going to take a little test. And the way we're going to do this is I can't see all the hands. I was going to do show of hands, but there's a lot of hands. So I wanted to have you vote. So I will see as many hands as I can. And Brian, maybe you can help me determine which one of these. We'll just do the best we can. But I'm going to open this quiz up and we're going to just see how we do, whether we can determine whether something is real or fake. Another great exercise to use with your staff and your students, because a lot of people think they will always know. A lot of people are still looking for a sixth finger. That was so 2 years ago. That's not happening anymore so much. A third arm, things like that. The images are getting so good that there's really no telltale sign anymore. Okay, R or F sounds good, Brian. Thank you. So Brian put in the chat, whenever I say go, put R or F in the chat, and that will make it much easier. And so I'm going to go ahead and start the quiz, and we will. Okay, so there's an image there. So we're just going to do that real quickly. If you think she's real, put R. If you think she's fake, put an F in the chat. And then we will let Brian be the judge of which one it is. Looks like most people think she's fake so far. I'm seeing a bunch of Fs, no Rs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click it. And then Brian put in there too why. If anybody has any idea of why you think that, Ashley thinks it's real, Leo thinks it's real. And I'm going to go ahead and click fake, even though we've got a few reals. Somebody said eye discrepancy. Okay, so we're going to see. Okay, that fooled us. So those of you that said R, pat yourself on the back because you got it right. Okay, apparently that one was real. Okay. So she's just has funny eyes, I guess. Okay, so we have another one here, real or fake, and it's actually a video. You can see he's blinking, he's moving. So on your mark, set, go. Real or fake? R or F? Okay, 1, 2. This one looks more evenly mixed. What do you think, Brian?
Yes, it looks a little more even too. I'm seeing about equal numbers, unlike the first one.
Okay, I think maybe a few more R's. So I'm going to go with real and see what we think. Okay, we got that one right. So again, if you said real that time, you got it. Pat yourself on the back. We'll do about 2 more. We won't finish the whole quiz, but And if you're going just by probability, we had one fake, one real. So okay. A lot of movement there. A lot of okay. Okay.
Looking
So
real.
what do you everybody thinks is real? Most people think he's real. So let's go with that one. And we got that one right as well. So we'll do one more. We'll see how we do. Lighting and shadows make it seem real. The movement makes it seem real too for people who don't know any better and don't realize that you can actually do that with these tools now. And so we have another one here. Real or fake, whatever you think. Looks like most people think she is fake. Anybody want to say why? What makes you think that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and click fake. I think that one wins this time. The eyes, pixels. Okay. Okay. And whoever said fake, you got it that time. So you guys did pretty good. Honestly, I don't do very well on these, to be perfectly honest. I'm not an attention to detail person. And so I really struggle with those. And usually when I do this live, the audience does better than I do. But there's several different versions of that kind of thing online that you can use to kind of help train people to be more critical. And for our students in particular, as they're seeing this digital slop everywhere, in politics and, even, students using it to make things of each other or their teachers, that can be very damaging. So it's really important that we're making sure they're aware of that. And so we're going to do a little activity again where you're going to get to make your own deep fake. And it only takes a second. But as you see on the screen, there are 4 images of me. And I will promise you, I've never been in prison or a boxer. I've never been on Game of Thrones. I've never ridden a pink unicorn, even though Brian's really jealous and thought I did, but I have not. And so all of these I created just in a matter of a couple of seconds. And there's a QR code there. There's a short link that Brian has dropped in the chat. If you want to do that on your phone or your computer, whenever you go to that website, I'll pull it up and show you. All you have to do is just to click make your deep fake and put your face in the camera. And I will just go ahead and do it right now. Okay. And so if I put my face in the camera and click the button, take my photo, and it's going to just randomly choose a background for you. It will let you choose your own prompt. Oh, that's very flattering. I've never had that one before. I'm not sure what I'm doing in that one, but again, very, very quick. And unfortunately, it does look like me. I can't deny that it looks like me. And so very quick and easy. This is a teaching tool. I have been told that it will not, if the person in the face is obviously a kid, it will not do it. It's for adults only, but it's something that you as a teacher can demonstrate. But if it detects that you are younger than 18 by facial recognition, it won't allow you to engage with the tool. But I want to give you 1 second to do that. And then if you want to drop yours in the chat, you can just click here and you can copy a link and it will give you a link. I see somebody's joining me in prison in the chat. Andrea has the old orange prison shot with a jumpsuit, and drop some of those in there and we can kind of laugh at each other. But it usually does pretty well. I know I did it a couple of weeks ago and compared it to one I'd done earlier, and it looked like I'd aged about 10 years. But usually it does pretty well. And yes, it says AI generated because this is a teaching tool. It's meant to teach about it. And it also has some great information below it and ways that you can learn more. And so if you want to learn more, the QR code, yes, the QR code is right there. And it's Brian also dropped the URL in the chat up there, 3 or 4 chats above. It's just deepfake.civai.org. I'll try to drop it in there again. Yeah, somebody's got the alley shot. I hated that one. That one is also not very flattering. Okay, so there's the link. So Sue got the alley shot. There's one that's like a security camera. There's one like carrying a gun out in the field, like you're hunting, like that one. Yeah, that Leo just posted in there. I didn't include that one because I didn't think it was appropriate for me to put on a presentation, but it was actually pretty good also. So again, just a real easy way to show people, teachers and students alike, how easy it is to use to generate something like this. And again, that is a teaching tool. It has lots of resources on that page. But if a student or a person wants to do this maliciously, there are so many websites out there. All you have to do is just Google it, face swapping technology, things like that. And they take no skill whatsoever to do. All it takes is an image of a person and maybe another person that you want to mix up, or you want to swap out the face. And people have to start realizing that you really cannot believe anything you see anymore. And so our students, unfortunately, are going to grow up the rest of their lives in that world. It doesn't matter if it's an image, a video, a piece of text. Any of those things could potentially be faked. And so I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Keep dropping them in there if you're getting them and you want to share. I see Sue's got a good one there too. I guess she's hopefully a lawyer or defendant in court. And Brian's dropping his in. So I'd love to see those. But this is just a screen about how to share and looking at the information. But I also want to point out that audio can also be deep faked. And this is a famous case from last year, which I'm going to play and hope that you can hear. Tell me if you're not hearing it here in a second. I'm not hearing it either because it's not playing. Let me present. I have to present for it to play. So I'm gonna have to present a few times because I have some things to play. So, okay, so this is.
Republicans have been trying to push nonpartisan and Democratic voters to participate in their primary. What a bunch of malarkey. You know the value of voting Democratic when our votes count?
And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but that was a pretty famous case last year where a deep fake of Joe Biden was sent out on a robocall telling people not to go vote. And obviously, if you're a political observer, you probably know he wouldn't be saying that. But you could be forgiven for thinking that voice sounds a lot like him because it does. Even like using the word malarkey, that's pretty stereotypical of Joe Biden and kind of his folksy way of speaking. And so that can be done very quickly and easily as well. And on the right, there's a link to a story from the Associated Press last year where a principal was actually accused of being racist and making a bunch of racist comments. And after it was investigated, they found out that the clips that were being shared around of him were actually deep fakes, and they were created by his athletic director, who was kind of in some hot water with him. And so unfortunately, that was adults in the building doing that to other adults, but students could do this potentially too, cases where they could potentially make deep fakes of other students or teachers or principals. And so we have to be really, really conscious of anything we hear, not just believe it immediately. And it really needs to be investigated thoroughly before anybody is punished or anything happens. This is an example that I did with a tool called Cartesia. And it only took 3 seconds. I read one sentence, and you guys have been listening to me for quite some time now. And so in 3 seconds of taking my voice and listening to it, it was able to generate this likeness of my voice. And I'm going to
Welcome to my session. My name is Vera, and I'm the Emerging Technologies Consultant for the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I'm a veteran educator, AI and emerging technologies enthusiast, and an AI literacy trainer.
Okay, and I'm not going to listen to the whole thing, but as you can tell, that sounds an awful lot like me, and it's gotten better and better. I've done this several times over the last couple of years, and it used to take like 10 minutes of my voice, and it would get somewhat like it. Well, then it was 5 minutes. Now we're down to 3 seconds, and it gets that close to my voice. So imagine if I were training it on hours of my voice. Actually, an example that I use sometimes that I don't have in the slide today is Randy Travis, who has lost the ability to speak. He used his producer used, of course, hours and hours and hours of his video singing in the past. And they've actually created new music with Randy Travis's voice with his permission, using an AI tool that was trained on his voice from past singing that he had done. And so this content is really, really, these tools are getting exceptionally good at creating this kind of deceptive technology. And I'm going to play just a little clip of this one. This is a research project called OmniHuman from ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok, which, by the way, if you didn't hear, I heard today that TikTok is adding image generation. And so all those people who are on TikTok are now going to have the ability to generate images from a still photo. And I hope it won't be this good, but this is the same parent company who created this. I'm going to play just a second of it. Because all of me loves all of you. Okay, and that hopefully you could hear that, but that was created only with one picture of a person and a sound clip. And so they matched up the voice, the movements, the intonation, the emotion, everything, and created that deepfake video with just one picture and a sound clip. And so that technology is both amazing and kind of frightening when you think about the way that some of these children think or don't think. Maybe the lack of thinking would be more appropriate. But even though that stuff is scary, I still say that education is our best weapon against it. It's the best thing we can do to mitigate these negative implications of AI. And so we are, as educators, we have the most important job in the world right now to try to train our students to use this stuff ethically and safely. And so teaching them to always evaluate everything. Any piece of content that they see now, they should be suspicious of. They should not believe anything on the surface. And I'm actually going to skip this prompting because we're almost out of time. And because I have a couple of other activities I wanted to do, but I do want to talk about role playing a little bit because role playing is a great way to use these tools. But there are, based on some of the things we've talked about, the bias and the models and things, there are some concerns about role play tasks. And so creating a prompt like this, like take on the role of a famous person, maybe Amelia Earhart or whoever, and then you let them ask questions of that person. It kind of is a great way to kind of get insight into a situation or a time in history, or maybe it's a fictional character, or maybe you take on Jonas from The Giver and let students interact with it. It's a great activity and it really kind of fits in about anywhere, but it does have some concerns, and I want to make sure that people are aware of them. First of all, we need to make sure that our students are understanding AI before they interact with chatbots at all. They need to understand that it's not a real person, that it's just based on data and it's an algorithm, it's not thinking. And because they're so lifelike now and so realistic, we need to make sure they understand that they don't have the capacity to care for them. They don't have the capacity to be ethical or they don't understanding any of that. But we need to make sure we're being real transparent that students are using a chatbot and not a person. That it's not a real person. And so not say Amelia Earhart's here today and we're going to talk to her. You need to say, we're going to use a tool called AI to pretend it's Amelia Earhart so you can ask some questions about it. And then you need that human oversight, again, making sure students are carefully evaluating those results, and that they need to be old enough to do that. They need to be old enough to be to have the cognitive ability to do that. And it needs to be something that is effectively taught and modeled and reinforced by the teacher. And so if you're going to use any kind of historical chatbot, we recommend that only for older students and only as an exercise in critical thinking, where it's used in conjunction with like primary source documents and other resources so that they're kind of fact checking the models. It's a great activity for that, but our younger students just don't have that capacity at this time. And so we caution against using this kind of historical chatbots, especially those of marginalized people. With younger students in particular, based on all of that we talked about earlier about the bias in the models. One of these models cannot accurately reflect Harriet Tubman's experience because there's not enough data in the system to reflect it. And a lot of times they have guardrails and things around them as well. One famous example that happened a few weeks ago was, actually this was a few months ago, where there was a Harriet Tubman chatbot and the students were engaging with it and kept asking why she had a head injury. And she just kept avoiding the question because the tool had a guardrail around violence of speech. And so you can't accurately reflect the experience of a slave. while you're also not allowed to talk about violence. And so that's just an example. It kind of gave the impression that it was like a summer camp experience where they're singing by the fire, and it avoided all of the ugly, realistic implications of it. And another experience where somebody had created an Anne Frank chatbot that told students they really just shouldn't blame anybody for the Holocaust. And so those are things that we have to be very, very careful about with historical figures in particular. Using it for a book character is great. Using it for like a career, to represent a career, something like that. But this is basically what I just said. So I'm going to skip over that because I already said all of that. But just be very cognizant and careful about that. And teachers too. And so in our guidelines, you've probably seen this framework. It's called the Every framework. It was created by me and Amanda Bickerstaff from Education. And it includes some reminders to help people to make sure that they're effectively and responsibly using AI. And so it's an acronym. The E stands for evaluating the output, always using that human oversight. The V for verifying. Any kind of facts or figures in it need to be verified. And again, that's easy to do now because it's going to give you links to the sources and you can go verify them easily. Engaging with it, not just taking whatever answer you have, making sure that you get a conversation going and you keep requesting changes if needed, revising the output so that it matches your voice. And then remember that you're responsible. You can't blame the AI if it gave you an inaccuracy because it's your job to catch that inaccuracy. And also making sure that you're being transparent about how you've used it by giving disclosure statements. And Leo, I'll get that question in just a minute. And I want to give you a moment to engage with a couple of things that I've created. We don't have time to do both, so I'm going to show you both and let you pick one. So this one is one that I've just done recently with Canva. And by the way, the next webinar on how to do this, Canva code, how you can create interactive learning tools with Canva now, but you can actually interact with this live. And what it is a little study guide about the Every framework, which you're actually welcome to take and use as well. And I will share a link to it. I don't think I put a link on here to it, but if you just go through this, each page of it gives you some information and examples, and then it has little scenarios that you can engage with, and you can go in and check them and it will check you live. And so it goes through all steps of it and then it gives you an exit ticket. The other one is this. It's a GPT, which you have to have access to ChatGPT Store to be able to use. But it takes you through, you put in a topic you want to know about, and it takes you through and reminds you at every step. Okay, now you need to evaluate it, check for everything. Now you need to revise it. And then at the end, it will give you a disclosure statement. And so I want to take I know it's not enough, but about the next 4 minutes and let you engage with one of those two tools. The first one would be more for students. The second one is more for teachers. And I'm not sure what T22265 means. I think somebody might have pasted that accidentally. But while you're doing that, I'm going to look at Leo's question. I have to read it first and then try to address it while you're working. And so I'm going to set a 3-minute timer. Except for I can't count. And so 3-minute timer. And Leo says, what are your thoughts about the statement Bill Gates saying that in 10 years' time, some jobs, including teaching, can be replaced? Any idea on how educators can stay relevant? Well, I personally disagree that teachers will ever be replaced. And I think that because there's so much more than just the creating lessons and delivering lessons and grading papers that teachers do. They have a million jobs. And some of those, the most important parts of them, the learning to know, getting to know your students, building relationships with them, understanding the nuance of their individual situations, that's stuff that AI can't do. But I do think that there is a danger that schools, in order to stay relevant for students, we're going to have to adapt and change how we do school. School has to change. We can't keep using an industrial model of education, and that's highly focused on testing and regurgitating information. And so much of our energy is spent on teaching to that test. And we've got to change how we do school. And my personal belief is it needs to go much more toward student-centered learning, things like project-based learning. I'm a huge fan of design thinking, learning portfolios where students are really analyzing the learning process and the meta-analysis of that. We're going to have to switch to those things because we're living in a, as either Malik calls it, a homework apocalypse. There's very little that you can throw at a kid now that they can't do on AI, the kinds of things we've always done. And so the human aspect of it is, those are the jobs that are the safest, that have a really big human element and where humans are engaging with other humans. And so I think teaching actually will be safe, but it's going to look different. And unfortunately, education and government moves glacially, and this is moving so fast that we can't keep up. And so it's going to really challenge us to adapt quickly enough so that people don't keep leaving and going to homeschools and charter schools and private schools and things like that, because we've got to change quicker than we normally do. Thank you. Okay, we have about 42 seconds, and while people are finishing up, if anyone wants to come off mute and talk about either one of those activities. I don't know if you had time to get all the way through the GPT, but either one of those is available for use. And I don't know why I didn't think to put the short link for the first one, but I'll add it back to the slide deck. But this one has a short link and you can use it anytime. It's a public facing GPT that anyone can use. Okay. Ticking down, raise your hand or unmute or pop in the chat if you have any comments about either one of those tools. And just remember that those are available to you to use as teaching tools as well. Okay, Natalie says a great resource. We're able to use it with our teachers in the district. Thank you. Is that the Chat GPT one? I guess probably the GPT, because I just came out with the other one a couple days ago. So yeah, I'm glad you were able to use it. I think it really does a good job. It really, it works well as long as people can access that GPT store. It doesn't work with students generally because that's going to be blocked for them, but it is great for training other teachers. Anybody else? We just a couple of minutes left, and if anybody else has a comment or wants to come off mute. Okay, well, I am going to move right along, and I will add, after we finish today, I'll add a short link to the Canva one so that could be used for students as well. So yeah, Canva code, can it be used outside your presentation? What I've seen, Karen, is you have to add it into a presentation, and I'm sure that will change, but you can add it into anything. But yeah, I will share it so you can use it. I have a website that has it on it, and I will drop that in. The Canva webinar is May 28th, and it is in Eventbrite, and I can drop that link too in a minute. Once we're kind of closing up, I'll drop those links in the chat. And then on June 11th, we're actually having somebody from Canva who's doing our webinar on all of the Canva updates, because there are a lot of them. I'll just be covering Canva code specifically on the 28th, May 28th, but June 11th, somebody from Canva is joining us and doing a webinar for North Carolina specifically on all of their new AI updates. And so I'll drop a link in where you can register for those in a minute. Okay, so we're going to kind of wrap up in a minute, but I do want to point out the concern about AI social companions. This is something that is, again, because of the way the models have changed and how human-like they've become, is a growing concern for our kids. So, and this graphic here, actually, I just saw it about a week ago. I'm not sure what date it came out, but from Harvard Business Review, let me close that out so you can see it. But they did a top 10 use cases last year and this year, and you can see how things have shifted. But the number one use case right now for generative AI chatbots, according to their research, is therapy and companionship. And that is something that scares me. I know it has some benefits. There's been some therapeutic benefits that I've heard of, but for our young people, again, who don't have the life experience to vet things carefully, and they're being sometimes given harmful advice by some of these things, and then using tools like Character AI, which I heard recently also is going to start having live video chats with people that look very human and very real. So that's also very scary. But we've got to really make sure we're educating our students. And so other concerns is emotional dependency. They foster intimacy. Students start engaging with them and kind of avoid their human relationships. They can be prompted a lot of times very quickly and easily to start engaging in sexually explicit role play. And there was that young man in Florida who committed suicide a few months ago. That was basically what happened with him. He had gotten into like a sexual relationship. Thank you, Brian, for dropping that. He dropped the link for the Canva vibe coding one that I'm doing next in the chat. But mental harms, there have been 8 cases where they've given them harmful advice. Again, remember they're psychophantic. So the child is going to give the child's version of events. Oh, my parents are so awful. They just torture me. They won't ever let me do anything. And sometimes these will say, well, if it's that bad, you should really leave. Things like that. And so we've got to be really concerned about them giving harmful advice, about eating. If they say, I'm so fat, what am I going to do about it? And then they might say, well, maybe you need to stop eating, or maybe you need to eat less. And so things like that we have to be really concerned about. They also have very poor age verification. Pretty much anybody can check a box saying, yes, I'm 13, and use the tools. And there's, it's potentially something going to change about that, but we don't know yet. Addictive design, because they give that emotional feedback immediately, it undermines the need to socialize and learn how to get along with actual humans. And in that psychophantic behavior, also, they're going to just be agreeable. The kid can be saying the craziest off the wall thing in the world, and a lot of times the tool will just agree with them. And so those are things that we have to be super concerned about. And also this geolocation risk, I just wanted to point that out. Some of these new tools can get clues from the surroundings and the pictures very easily. And so people who are sharing socially on social media, constantly doing selfies and telling where they are, somebody could put that picture into an AI tool, a stalker or something perhaps, and could get a location pretty easily from just the surroundings. And so I uploaded a picture of my daughters from a couple of years ago, and just to see there's really no land markings or anything around, and it got exactly where we were, which of course La Jolla is pretty famous. I did one from my yard and had no idea where I was, but anywhere that you're out in public and there are any kind of land markings or anything well known, then these tools can detect where you are. And so what you can do as an educator, I've long been a believer in focusing on your sphere of influence and your sphere of control. There are a lot of things out here that we can't fix. We can't change the market. We can't change the bad actors who are going to abuse the tools, but we can advocate for state and local policies that help responsibly adopt, teach students safe and responsible use, educate our parents and our community. And you can build your own AI literacy, which of course you're doing now, infusing it in your classroom and teaching and modeling how to use it responsibly. And then just a couple of things to do, take AI tools to build your work, try things, infusing it in your curriculum, and teach and model frameworks like the Every Framework. But it is time. We're actually 2 minutes over, so I do want to give you the evaluation link. We do appreciate your feedback. We do have to account for how we spend our taxpayer dollars, and this helps us with that. But also note that Brian has put a couple of links in the chat for you to register for other webinars, and we'll have some others coming up this summer as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions or engage with any comments or anything that you have. But I don't want to hold you over because we are now 3 minutes over. So I appreciate your time and attention and your engagement. And I will